A year ago, the flooding from Hurricane Helene swept through western North Carolina, East Tennessee, and southwest Virginia. Whole communities were turned upside down, and one of the places hit hard was Erwin, Tennessee, home to locally owned jet broadcasting stations WEMB and WXIS. Their studios and AM tower sat right next to the Nolichucky River, and the river took it all. The story of those stations and their owner and operator, Maria True, is another one of the stories of Appalachia. But folks, this story, we're not going to tell this story. Instead, you're going to hear directly from Maria True, who runs jet broadcasting in Erwin. And she's going to share what that night was like, the next day, what she lost, and what she's planning for the station moving forward.
Hello, I'm Maria True, and I'm the General Manager of Jet Broadcasting's WEMB and WXIS, located in Erwin, Tennessee, and licensed in Johnson City and Erwin. The day before the hurricane came to Erwin, I decided that I was going to change all the filters on the station, and I was going to scrub up the place and get it sparkling clean. It was a great weather. It was getting cloudy, though, and I heard an alert that a lot of our people, first responders, were headed to Florida to help with the flooding that was going on there. So I was standing on the station porch, and I was watching the trucks go down the road, and I was giving them the thumbs up, as they went by, because I knew that they were going to go do some really honorable work in Florida. Little did I know that at the same time the next day, that station would no longer be. So I stayed down there, and I worked very hard for the whole evening and then went home late. So the next day I decided that I would just go in a little later. I was awakened by the program director, Mark Lackey. I might preface this by saying I had a dream that my mother came to me. She's been gone for about 3 years, and she said, "Maria, I've got your back no matter what." So I was already crying when Mark came, and I said, "Mark," he said, "we need to go to the station." I said, "But I need to tell you, I just had this dream. My mother came to me and told me everything was going to be all right." I did not know what was going on in the background. So we went and started on the route to WEMB and WXIS, and I was stopped probably right before the hospital in Erwin, and they said, "You can't go to the station." And I said, "Well, I just need to ask you, is my tower still there?" Because we had lost the tower in 1977. My father, he was a smart guy. He had CCC come and build a dike behind the station to prevent any future flooding, because he would have not put another tower there had he not felt like it was secure. So I just want to say that in his defense. So anyway, he said, "No, your tower's gone, and so is your station." So I said, "What are we going to do?" "We're going to go help people." And so, we went downtown to the town hall and said, "Where can we help?" And they said, "Go to the high school, because they're going to start lifting people off of that hospital, and you see what you can do there." So we went to the high school, the Unicoi County High School, and they were awaiting directions on how to get the people from the top of that hospital to the high school and then lifted out. So there were Chinooks coming. There was just all this action happening. Everyone, it looked so calm there in that part of town. You just couldn't believe that was going on down the road, because it turned into sunny skies, and it looked like a beautiful day. Who knew that Nolichucky River had swelled 30 feet? I bought everybody pizzas, all the people that were working down there, and watched them lift these people up. That some just had a sheet on, some of them were just down to their underclothes, and that was devastating. And so then I decided, well, the station's not going to be on the air for a while. And then I got a call from Sydney, Australia, and they wanted to interview me that afternoon. And I said, okay. So I pulled my stuff together so to speak. And they called me. I think I was in shock at that point because everything I'd ever had known was gone down the river. But they said, well, Maria, and they had their beautiful Australian accent, we see it's going to be months or possibly years before you can restore this station. I said, oh, no, it won't. I said, I'll have that football game on Friday night. So they were like, well, we like your push through. And I said, thank you. And then I started getting phone calls from radio stations all over the country. And they said that we'll give you anything that you need. Sorry. And I was just overwhelmed with all these radio angels, and that's what I named them all. And they all came to me and said, give me your list. What do you need? So then that's when the program director and one of his very good friends is an engineer, Matt Crowder, contacted him. And also Tom King from Kentronics, he does the AM. Matt Crowder from the FM contacted me. Other radio station owners in the area contacted me and said they would help any way they could. And that was just so beautiful to me because usually we're in competition, you know. Kentronics said, you know, we're just going to go ahead and start pulling things for you, and we're going to go ahead and put this together. And then Higher Ground Technology said, and I've got the FM covered. All these blessings just started coming pouring in, and in the interim I decided that I would go to all the places that were doing donations where you could go do water, and I was doing lives and interviewing people on where to go, and I was running those on my streaming at jetbroadcasting.live. So the local people would know where to go to get those things and those services. So I kept announcing. Another funny thing was WBIR came up, Libby Cunningham, which we've become very close friends, and she's a doll, and that's in Knoxville. And she came to interview me one day too, and that was at Ground Zero. Oh, let me tell you about Ground Zero. They finally allowed us to go down there. It was nothing but rocks. And I said, but I like rocks. Because the funny thing was, I used to collect rocks where I'd go to different places, and I would drop them there in that little parking area that we had that was graveled. And I had little rocks, and I would remember those rocks from all over the place that I would gather those up. Well, I had some rocks now for sure. And so it was what it was. And it was weird because the first thing I found was a piece of pottery, and I turned it over, and it was a green leaf. And I said, talking about turning a new leaf, and I had to get the perspective of this is a new beginning, and God provides, and you can't hold on to anything but my spirituality and my faith. My father was there since forever, starting on top of a drugstore in downtown Erwin to, building the studios out there. He and my uncle was the engineer. And to be honest with you, I planned on moving into that little radio station later. Just take that AM antenna down, put some siding on, and have a nice little path to the Nolichucky. But God had other plans. I lost all my daughter's artwork, her birth certificates, and the letter from the 1800s that my great-great-grandfather had to say that he was certified circuit rider for the Kentucky Methodist circuit riders. And that broke my heart. And my dad had some Western Union telegraphs, you know. There was a lot of that sentimentality there. And all my father's, he had like the largest collection of big band music. They called him Country Jim, but he was big band. And he had the largest collection probably on the East Coast of big band music, and all of his reel-to-reel tapes that he had made. Everything that he had ever produced, everything was gone. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, because radio goes everywhere. And it's a transmitter. And we can get one of those. And we're still here, and we're coming back strong. I had that Friday night. It was of what they call a free game, you know, where they're off that week. Then, you know, the next week those engineers sat around in my living room. Sorry. And they got that Unicoi County High School football game on the air. It was a miracle. It was crazy. And they were sitting there in my little living room with their headphones on and making it work, and had that Unicoi County High School football game on. And the guys who did the football for me, I'll never forget, because they said, we're going to stand by you, Maria, and we're going to call these football games. And I'm weird about my football. That's my favorite time of the year. It was my father's favorite time of the year. And I think it's the NFL or better. And all my callers have always been just excellent. And all of the games were on the air. And then the FM was restored in 3 weeks.
Are you planning on rebuilding the station?
Right now, my focus is on, getting my transmitters up to speed. Like I said, a lot of people let me borrow things, and now I'm in the process of buying my own stuff and replacing that. I want to make sure the life of the station is restored first, and that was in the transmitters and all that stuff. And it's going to be a lot more easy to monitor. It's going to be, his radio's come a long way, because I can remember when you could go to the stations on some days back in the late 70s, early 80s, and you could see arcs of electricity going up the AM antenna. It was crazy times. You really think of Nikola Tesla when you saw stuff like that. And sometimes I could walk in. Well, Daddy wouldn't let us go in there much, but you could walk into the room where the tower cage, and it would be sparking all over. It was just like probably not right. Something was wrong, but I mean, you could see the electricity for sure. But right now, I want to get all that taken care of, and then a studio. But I don't think I want to put it back down there.
Have you managed to find anything down the Nolechucky?
You know what? About 2 weeks ago, we went to and took some detectors, and we couldn't find a thing. And you know what? Metal detectors. And I think it's because those rocks are so deep now. And it was told to me that there were boulders coming down that river that were big as trucks. And it was just pulverizing everything along its path. And that sweet church that made it through, that was like 3 places down from the station, right beside the hospital, right near the where the hospital, well, it still stands, but it's not in use, was someone found at that church my Maria True general manager plaque from my desk, full of sand and bent. And there's been 2 pictures found, and that's it. Some broken records, just shards of broken records, and now it's just rocks. Because I was thinking, you know what? That radio station just sailed away like a ship. And it's going to be perched up on a bank someplace, all intact. Dreamer. What stands out in my mind is how it totally resurfaced that entire region. And a lot of folks say that it's going to take a long time to get this place back to where it used to be. There is no going back. It's rerouted now. Things are gone. That place is still beautiful with the surrounding mountains, but that area, it was devastated. It looked like a war zone. The helicopters were swirling for weeks. That acrid smell of all the burning that was happening for people getting rid of the debris. It was lots of sirens all the time. It felt like it being in a war zone, for sure. But there has been a lot of improvement, but there's still, you can see a lot of devastation. And another thing that stuck in my mind is when the station were down, WEMB, I would go to these daily press conferences with Erwin. Jim Erwin did those. And each day the Mexican population that had worked at the factory there, they would come with their pictures of their wives or their loved ones, posters of them on a stick to say, hey, this person's missing. And I would notice each day that there would be fewer and fewer of those pictures coming because they were finding those bodies. And I remember this one man kept coming every day, holding out hope, and his picture looked a little bit rumpled, a little more crumbled each day. And then finally that day came when he was no longer attending the press conferences, and we all knew what that meant. The horse that resided down there at Riverview Road in front of the station, there was a field out there, and her name was Bianca. And I did not own that field. It belonged to the neighbor. But I remember driving to the station that day and seeing this horse, this beautiful, I said, that's Black Beauty if I've ever seen it. And then I asked the neighbor, I said, whose horse? And she told me that horse had papers from Germany, and her name was Bianca, and she was a retired jumping horse. And that horse was regal, and she knew it, because she wouldn't speak to me unless I had an apple. And then after I gave her the apple, she would leave, done with you. And I just loved her though. And at the end, right before the flood, a couple of months before the flood, Bianca was at the point where the station was here, and the main road that I would turn to get on was about, I don't know, half a football field. She started walking along the fence line, escorting me to the road in the evenings. I loved that horse. And those pictures of her when she is stranded, embracing herself beside the station, it makes me feel like she was waiting for me to come out there and help her or something. And that broke a lot of hearts. And she's not been found, and she wasn't recovered. So that was Bianca, and she was beautiful.
It's now been a year. You've had a year, and things have, I guess, have settled a little bit back down to normal. But what's your perspective on the floods and the future from this point a year out?
My perspective is you really don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next, from 1 hour to the next, and you can't take anything for granted. And when you want to start rushing things, you just need to breathe, because it's all in God's timing, and you can't hold on to anything in this world, nothing, because it's all going to get taken away. And a lot of people in business are type A personalities and think they're in control. Well, guess what? You're not. You can do what you can do and make the most of that. And you do keep pushing forward and to build back and preserve a legacy, a 70-year-old legacy. But I've learned patience. And learn that, the world's not, the world might fall apart, but it might not. And just breathe.
Well, Steve, Maria's story is a tough one, but it's also about holding on and finding a way forward. The Nolichucky washed away the building, the tower, and all these different things there in that little field that's right off of I-26. But it didn't wash away her determination to keep the town's radio station alive. And, quite frankly, I am just really glad that she shared the story with us, and you heard it yourself. And we're really glad that you joined us for it, and we want to thank you for listening.
Well, next week we continue our Helene stories when Kevin Beam joins us to tell what it was like to be on call for the fire department the night of the hurricane in Marion, North Carolina. We hope you join us. Till then, y'all take care. So long, everybody.